In Cloning Marines 14, all the Xenomorphs have different abilities. Some Xenos have support abilities, some have assault abilities, some have defensive abilities, and some of them are very well rounded and have a mix of everything. The Facehugger has one single purpose, and that is to implant Marines with larvae. There are a lot of overlapping abilities, but I will still cover them individually per Xeno. There's thankfully not all that many Xenos in the playtest right now, so doing them right now is actually easier for me. All Xenomorphs feature the ability to rest. Rest says lie down to regenerate health and plasma more quickly while in weeds. I have actually never played Xenomorph in CM13, so I don't know exactly how it works there, but I can say resting doesn't quite work the way it says it does. Lying down does regenerate more health on weeds, but it has no effect on plasma generation as far as I'm aware. But other than resting, that'll be more useful on future Xenos. There's also the Watch Xenomorph button, which all this does is it will literally let you see the perspective of any Xenomorph you are a Hive mind. There is Hide, which is a pretty unique ability. So without Hide toggled, I am running on top of these chairs and tables. But if I do hide, I will go under it. And you can tell that you're hiding because there will be a purple outline on the box, and you'll see like occlusion pop up on the tables. So this is really the only strength you have as a facehugger. You can't tank any bullets. You can't really, you might tank a knife hit, maybe. You might catch a shrapnel and live, but you're extraordinarily weak as a facehugger. Also, facehuggers will usually die off weeds, but I made myself indestructible because, well, I'm not actually fighting anyone. The only purpose you have as a facehugger, though, is leap. You can't even attack, you can't even bite people or anything. Leap is jump towards a given location and knock the enemy's hit. That is true, but what it actually is you will jump on their face. So if I jump on this Marine's face, there's a do after bar, but if you land it, you will end up incapacitating this Marine for a pretty long time, and you will automatically implant them with an alien embryo. So what that does is it implants a Xeno larva into their chest. If they do not have it surgically removed, it will burst out and kill the Marine. Speaking of the larva has the same abilities as the facehugger, but it can't leap. It can hide, it can watch other Xenos, but it at least does not die off weeds. So if you are trying to relocate off the hive or something, or you're just born somewhere else, if it's not directly on a weed, you'll still be okay. There's literally nothing to do as a larva other than wait. You can't see this in game, but what you will have is something called the Xeno evolution component. And all you have to do is wait 2 minutes, and after 2 minutes, you'll be able to evolve into your first actual caste or tier of alien. So, as a larva, you sit around with your queen, you sit around with your family, your sisters, whatever you want to call it, and this is where people end up doing this nappy time, the sleep time stuff. It's kind of funny, but yeah, I can refresh it to show exactly how this works. Every second, there's a half point gain towards evolution. Once you hit 60 points, you will gain the ability to evolve. Once you evolve, you get 4 tier 1 options. The drone is actually the only one that has a tier 2 option at the moment, just due to the nature of the playtest being unfinished. But you can pick any single one that you want. You probably should gauge it based off of like what your hive needs. So if you're lacking good frontliners, you probably want to pick a defender. If you're lacking people to maintain the hive itself, you probably want to pick something like a drone. Sentinels are somewhere in between. There's a small do after bar when you evolve, and we transition into the drone. The drone is the first Xeno, I would say, that has quite a lot of abilities. The drone still features rest, but they now feature the ability to regurgitate. Regurgitate's really simple to explain, so any marine that's in a critical state, not a dead state, you cannot eat dead marines. You just click and drag them on your sprite, and it'll say you start to devour. And once you devour them, you will devour them, and then the regurgitate button lets you spit them out instantly, so this is good for transporting humans back to your hive. Now we have our first offensive ability, which is Tail Stab. Tail Stab's unique and cool in the fact that if you miss your Tail Stab, you will actually have a very short cooldown. Tail Stab has a massive range, so I'm over 2 tiles away, and you can see that I'm only just slightly too far away from hitting them, so if I get a little bit closer, I have indeed hit them, so it's almost like a range attack. The Tail Stab does a base 30 damage, and as of right now, it scales off nothing. But the cooldown's not very long. You can hit Marines over barricades with this. You can hit them if they're just running away from you. Next, we have Weak Corrosive Acid, and this lets you melt down structures or objects. Like I can melt a Marine's rifle. I can go up and melt a wall. The only difference between weak corrosive acid and like strong corrosive acid is, as far as I'm aware, is just the speed at which it corrodes something. So like if I put this on a wall, this wall will eventually corrode after like it's like 3 or 4 minutes. It takes a decent bit of time with weak corrosive acid. Next, we have emit pheromones. There are 3 types of pheromones that all the Xenos who can emit pheromones share. There's recovery, warding, and frenzy. Before we discuss the pheromones, though, we're going to want to discuss plant weeds. Plant weeds is plant a weed node that will spread more weeds. So what this does is it plants a weed node on the ground, which will spread out weeds. Weeds provide a very direct benefit. So for example, I'm only regenerating 0.25 plasma a tick off the weeds, but as soon as I step on the weeds, it starts generating much, much faster, and that's without resting, which, again, I haven't played Xenos in CM13, but I think you're supposed to rest to get the increased plasma regen on the weeds. Not 100% sure, but either way, that's how it works as of right now. It's a playtest after all. So, yeah, weeds are very, very important for recovery for Xenos. Also, weeds make it so Marines move slower, so always a good benefit, especially for melee-based creatures. Next, we'll talk about order construction. The only thing you can do right now with this is build a hive core, which I will discuss the hive core after I'm done with the drone. But basically, it takes a good bit of plasma to place the hive core, and then it requires an additional 1,000 plasma to finish it. To finish the hive core, you just left-click it, and it will distribute your plasma into it, and it'll tell you how much plasma you need. But you have to build it on weeds anyway, so as of right now, you get plasma back so fast that even a singular drone can build this in a second, pretty much. I mean, I've just finished it on my own. I don't want to focus on numbers too much because you can't really see these numbers in game, but I've taken some damage, and you'll notice that I'm not healing at all while off weeds. But as soon as I step on the weeds, you start doing some healing, and as soon as you lay down, you start getting additional healing. And then this is what recovery pheromones are for, is that it doesn't make you heal off weeds, but it makes you heal additional while standing on weeds, and it makes you heal even more while resting with the recovery pheromones. So all you really need to know as a Xeno player is that use recovery when on weeds and rest to fully heal very quickly. Recovery doesn't seem to have really any benefit in combat because unless you're on weeds, you're not going to be healing. So it's a situational pheromone. I mean, all the pheromones are situational. Next is the warding pheromone. And what warding pheromones do is actually very interesting. Warding pheromones reduce the damage you take while in a critical state as a xenomorph and increases how much damage it takes to actually kill you while you're in a critical state. Different Xenos have different pheromone multipliers, so something like a drone only has a multiplier of 2, where somebody like the Queen has a multiplier of 4, which affects how just valuable these pheromones are, how like effective their stats are. So I'm just going to show this, and again, you can't see these numbers in game, so I don't like getting too specific with numbers, but a normal drone will crit at 500 HP and die at 600 HP of damage. But with just the drone itself emitting its own pheromones, the damage it can withstand in crit is much higher. So I'll just mag dump it. So 500 damage is now in a critical state. So it is bleeding out slower than it normally would because of the warding pheromones. And then it's already past the 600 damage that it would have died at without the warding pheromones. So even with just a tier 2 multiplier warding pheromone, we have extended this Xeno's life. And I'll just keep shooting until it dies. So we've already taken an additional 200 damage, which is several bullets, that's grenade fragments, whatever. This is wasting more marine bullets and gives you a chance to recover this Xeno if you're playing a fellow Xeno to drag them back to the hive. So with just a multiplier of 2 with warding pheromones, we have over doubled the critical health that you can take as a Xeno. Yeah, you will still crit at 500, but that gives your Xeno sisters double the amount of time, basically, to actually recover you and drag you back onto the weeds to heal you. And because I know this is going to be a question, so I have damaged this Xeno past their original crit state. I will drop the warding pheromone. If you drop the warding pheromone and they're past their original crit state, they will die. So you have to be extremely cautious when you're trying to heal them, that you bring them back to the weeds. And if you're the only one emitting warding pheromones, you probably don't want to swap off of it until they're out of a crit state, because otherwise you can't really see their actual HP. So just be very cautious about this. And finally, of the pheromones, we have Frenzy. which Frenzy increases your movement speed. Obviously, the higher multiplier ones will increase your movement speed further. It also increases your basic attack damage more, aka just your slash. So normally a drone does 20 damage to an unarmored target, but with multiplied 2 Frenzy, we're actually doing a little bit more. But it's really the movement speed that's the benefit. I think in CM13, multiple Frenzies stack and increase damage further, but Frenzy as of right now in CM14 does not increase damage with multiple Frenzies going off. So it's really just about the movement speed and slightly increased damage. A slightly increased damage might mean 1 less bite on a Marine, which might mean 1 more crit Marine. So you have the options between defensive things like warding or offensive things like Frenzy. Realistically, though, when you have multiple Xenos attacking, you're going to have all of the buffs anyway. But yeah, that is pretty much it for the pheromones. And the only other differences with Xenos is that some Xenos have better pheromones because the higher multiplier. Finally, we have choose resin structure, and this is really simple to explain. We have resin wall, which is literally just a wall. You use the secrete resin option to build it. So it's just like building. Then you have a membrane, which is cheaper. The membrane is for it's basically just like a window. It lets you see through. But Xenos can see through walls, so just something worth considering. And then you have resin doors, which are, surprise, surprise, it's a door. It's transfer plasma, and it just transfers plasma. It's pretty self-explanatory. Hivelord, rest, gurgitate, watch Xenomorph, tail stab. We finally have better corrosive acid, and it costs slightly more than weak corrosive acid, but all this really does is it melts structures even faster than weak corrosive acid, much faster even. We have emit pheromones, which the Hivelord, compared to the normal drone, actually has a better multiplier. They have a 2.5 times multiplier to their pheromones, so more effective. That means more healing, more damage while in crit, more movement speed, more damage. They also have the order construction, so they can make hive cores. They have plant weeds, just like drones. They can build resin structures the same way as drones. They transfer plasma. Next, you have Resin Walker, which is run faster on weeds. It's a toggle. I probably should mention this. Hivelords are an evolution of drones. After you wait around as a drone for, I think it's 10 minutes, after 10 minutes, you have the ability to evolve into a Hivelord. It's also worth mentioning, though, that the pheromones of a Hivelord are potent enough that you can leave recovery on 24/7 while in your hive, while on weeds, and you can help recover any other Xenos that show up while out losing none of your own plasma. If you have Resin Walker on, though, and recovery pheromones, you actually can maintain pretty much max plasma. You lose a little bit over time, it seems like, but no, it actually maintains perfect 1,000 plasma. So you might as well, if you have Resin Walker on, you might as well have recovery pheromones on to get the extra plasma, to have extra movement speed, and help out your fellow Xenos. So while we're here, might as well talk about the Hive Core, which we just built. The Hive Core produces lesser drones, which are basically just drones, but weaker, and they can't go off weeds, so I'm not going to explain their abilities directly. The way the Hive Core works is it makes an X amount of lesser drones depending on how many max drones you have. So Xenos per lesser drone is 3. So for every 3 Xenos you add to the Hive, you will now have an extra maximum lesser drone. So very easy to show in real time. If I just spawn a bunch of Xenos, we can watch that number increase. We're up to 4, keep spawning just more. Every 3 you add will increase your max amount of lesser drones, as you can see. The Sentinel, just like all the other Xenos, can rest. Rest, same thing. You rest on weeds, you'll heal faster. We also have Regurgitate and Watch Xenomorph and Tail Stab. Tail Stab is the same for all Xenos, does 30 damage, it's a range attack. We have weak corrosive acid, nothing new. The unique abilities of the Sentinel are Slowing Spit, Scattered Spit, and Paralyzing Slash. Slowing Spit is launched as a projectile that'll slow the first enemy that it hits and paralyze them if they have no armor. So this Marine has no armor. So if you hit them with it, they will be stunned and drop whatever they have in their hands temporarily. And if they don't have like a magnetic harness, they will drop their gun on the floor. It's good for disrupting them, but it doesn't do any damage. And what by armor means, it actually means like armor. So even somebody with just a jumpsuit will be paralyzed. You can't directly see the movement speed slow down, but wearing their armor, they're down to 4.04. If I hit them with the Slowing Spit, they will lose over half their movement speed. So that's all you really need to know, is that they lose half their movement speed for a few seconds. Great for chasing, great for catching Marines and keeping them like ungrouped as easily. Next, we have Scattered Spit, which is launches multiple projectiles that slow any enemy they hit and paralyze them if they have no armor. This one actually always seems to paralyze even with armor, but it's like shorter, so I'm not entirely sure what's intentional there or not. And the interesting thing to note, even if you do hit them with it, they actually don't get slowed from it, so I don't know if it's necessarily the description's wrong or what exactly. Anyways, we have Paralyzing Slash, temporarily charge up a melee attack that will knock down the first enemy it hits after a short delay. So we can see how this works. I will activate it. It will use 50 plasma. Your next slash will apply a neurotoxin. If you don't attack within a very short window, you will lose it. You have waited too long, your slash will no longer apply neurotoxin. So this lets you either bite somebody directly to paralyze them, but what's cool is you can actually use this with tail stab. So you can actually basically stun someone from ranged, and this is a more powerful stun than the spit. It will keep them incapacitated for like 2 extra seconds, which is a massive amount of time in this game. That's enough time to 100-0 a Marine with your Xenos capitalizing off of it. Next, we have the Mighty Defender. The Defender still features Rest, Regurgitate, Wild Xenomorph, and Tail Stab. What they feature unique, though, is Toggle Crest Defense, Headbutt, Tail Sweep, and Fortify. The plasma costs look low, but that's because the Defender actually doesn't have a huge plasma reserve, so you have to be cautious when spamming these abilities while not near weeds, because you might not be able to keep spamming them. Toggle Crest Defense slows you down, but it gives you 5 additional armor, and, well, yeah, it slows you down a lot. You also can't use Tail Sweep while your crest is lowered, so you must be cautious with this. It's a defensive option, but that 5 extra armor effectively gives you a lot more HP. So, as a defender, you're kind of the only tank right now in the playtest, so this is definitely a solid option. So it costs no plasma, but you actually can still headbutt while your crest is down. So if you're like microing really well, you can have your armor up while charging. Headbutt is charging a direction to push back any enemies in your way. So it has a pretty decent range. So this is like over 2 tiles. If you hit as a Marine, it will push him back a little bit. It does actually pretty good damage. It does like 30 base damage. What I see as a pretty good combo is get your keybinds comfortable to have tail sweep and headbutt basically right next to each other in keybinds. So I charge into them and immediately press the tail sweep button. And what that does is it will knock over every Marine in a decent AoE around you. And it also does 30 more damage and can knock weapons out of people's hands if they don't have harnesses and stuff. It's a very deadly combo, but it's worth mentioning that tail sweep has a longer cooldown, so you can't always use them in tandem. Finally, we have Fortify, which become immobile and extremely resistant to projectile damage. This locks you in place and gives you really strong amount of armor, but it is frontal armor, so if a Marine flanks you, you're still more armor than normal, but you really want to have your head facing towards where the Marines are. This makes you take literally 0 damage against most non-AP bullets and takes very little against AP bullets. So you can soak up a lot of damage if you fortify and the Marines just keep shooting at you. They can still throw grenades at you, though. You're only resistant to projectiles, so be very cautious that you're not fortifying on top of a grenade. Well, you might be able to save one of your fellow Xenos doing that, but just a word of warning. Next up, we have the Rooney. The Rooney has Rest, Regurgitate, Wild Xenomorph, Tail Stab, Hide, which lets you hide under tables and stuff, but you are pretty large, so it's not like amazingly effective, but can still be very helpful in many circumstances. Finally, we have Leap, which is the bread and butter of a Rooney. Leap is you can click it and it'll give you an activation. You can actually do this with harm mode on, which I would obviously recommend because you're trying to harm the Marines. You can leap into them. If you land on them directly, you will knock them down for a second or two. What's really powerful to combo this with is keep harm on, jump into them, and then keep tackling them. Once you actually successfully tackle them, you can start dragging them away really fast, and you could just kind of keep chain stunning them by right-clicking them. To be even more effective with this, you can drag, stun, bite, drag, stun, bite. Obviously, this is only going to work on lone Marines. Any Marine that has help nearby will get help. But if you successfully tackle a Marine like that, you can drag them probably like 20 tiles. It's kind of crazy. Next, we have Bone Chips, which is just a projectile that you shoot out. It does very minimal damage. It's really only for like just hitting Marines, punishing them slightly for being out of position. And then we have Toggle Long Range Sight, which lets you see about 2 tiles further and This is really helpful, though, for how fast you are. This lets you plan ambushes. So, like, if you see a Marine on the outer edge tile here, you can see them, and they most likely cannot see you. Finally, we have the Queen. We still have Rest, Regurgitate, Watch Xenomorph, Tail Stab, Order Construction, Corrosive Acid, Emit Pheromones. The Queen has insanely powerful pheromones. They have a 4 times multiplier, which I'm not even going to show it. So with a normal drone's warding pheromones, they take about 1,300 damage to die, and while in a critical state. With warding, it goes up to like 2,400 damage before they die. It is actually crazy how much damage it can take. Frenzy with 4 times multiplier makes a Queen go from, I mean, I'll just show it. I'm at a 2.5, but with the 4 times multiplier Frenzied, so like, Queens can move rather fast with Frenzy. Next, we have Words of the Queen, which just sends a message to all members of your hive. So you can just say hi, and no, nobody can hear me because there's no other Xenos, but they will hear you regardless of where you are. You have Plant Weeds, which, just like the drones and the Hivelords, lets you spread your weeds around. We still have Choose Resin Structure, Secrete Resin, and finally we have the unique ability to become immobile and start laying eggs, which produce Facehuggers. This has a really long do after and leaves you quite vulnerable, so like, don't do this on the front lines. With recovery pheromones, while you're in this form, you actually will lose plasma, so be cautious about that. You can't like rest or anything while in this form. You really just sit here and wait around. So we have produced an egg, and at any time, once the cooldown's off, you can revert back into your mobile queen form. So while you're just sitting around the hive, it's probably best to be in that form, and you automatically go into a resting form from that position, and you're back to your normal queen self. And what you do with the eggs is you pick them up and you just plant them somewhere in a weed, and it will say the egg is not developed yet. It takes seconds for a Facehugger to actually develop. So Xenos like the Hivelord and stuff can help you with this. So that's every single ability currently in CM14. Yeah, this video is probably pretty long, but if you have more questions, the CM14 Discord is probably the place to ask, but people in the comments could probably also answer too.